episode, live stream, special episode of the Center for Baptist Leadership podcast or show, whatever you want to call it. I'm your host, Executive Director William Wolfe. Please make sure to like and subscribe on all your major podcast platforms, including YouTube. I'm joined today by Michael Clary. Michael, thanks for joining us.
Glad to be here. Thanks, William.
Michael is a pastor. He's a writer. He's a commentator. And I think Michael is arguably, and don't blush, Michael, one of the most insightful writers and commentators of our current moment in American evangelicalism, not just in the Southern Baptist Convention, but really across all of American Christianity. He's written a couple of great articles for us at Center for Baptist Leadership recently, and he's writing regularly all over the place, American Reformer, his Substack, and other places too. So we're going to talk about a couple of those things here today. But first, let me play the opener, let people join the show, and we'll be right back in a couple minutes.
Welcome to the Center for Baptist Leadership podcast, hosted by William Wolfe. Our mission is to cultivate courageous and biblical Baptist leadership for the 21st century. We aim to revitalize the Southern Baptist Convention from within, defend it from those who seek its destruction, and serve as a better Baptist voice in the public square.
All right, welcome back, folks. Again, I'm here with Michael Clary. Michael, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourselves for the people who don't know you? Everyone should know you. Maybe some people don't. So tell us who you are.
I'm a Baptist pastor at Christ the King Church in Fort Thomas, Kentucky. Planted the church in 2010 in the inner city of Cincinnati, and then we just moved across the river to Fort Thomas, Kentucky about 6 months ago. And so I'm a conservative Southern Baptist, and I write about things that I find interesting, and sometimes other people find that helpful. So that's me.
Are you a right winger, Michael?
I'm very much a right winger. Yes.
So as a pastor, you don't have a problem saying I'm a Christian pastor and I'm right wing.
That's right. I mean, the word the phrase right wing usually is, there's a caboose to the end of that phrase, which is extremist. And so a right wing extremist these days is, just a normal guy like your grandpa. But I guess if the shoe fits, I'll wear it. I'm a right winger. Not ashamed to say it.
That's great. And where are you from? Are you from? Oh, I can't remember. You've told me before, but are you from that area?
Close by. I grew up in West Virginia. It's about 2.5 hours from here. So I grew up, hillbilly, Appalachia, Huntington. I've always lived along the Ohio River, Huntington, and then Louisville, Kentucky, and now Cincinnati. I've always been a river rat, I guess, but yeah, close by.
That's great. Well, Michael, you're obviously no stranger to the show. We've had you on before. You might be one of our most prolific authors at this point. And of course, I would publish anything you send me every week, except for the fact that sometimes I need to publish other people too. And there's probably authors watching this who are like, William's sitting on my piece. Why haven't I sent it? Why haven't I published it yet? It's probably because when I get something new from Michael, it goes to the front of the line. So glad to have you on the show here today, Michael. The last month has been a really, in many ways, cataclysmic month for American society, for American politics, and for the church, with the assassination of Charlie Kirk, his memorial service, and then just yesterday, President Donald Trump awarded him, the highest civilian honor that any American can be rewarded with, posthumously, of course, with his wife and his coworkers there at the White House. And so we got to sort of reconsider the life and legacy of Charlie Kirk again yesterday. You have watched this unfold, what it's meant, what it means for American politics, what it means for the American church, of course, not just Southern Baptists, but, all Protestant evangelical churches here in America. Do you have sort of like a thesis of the last month and what it means for us now?
Sure. There've been a few inflection points over the last few years that I think has really crystallized and highlighted cultural truths that maybe were a bit obscure, but they just came more to light. Well, 2020 was a huge inflection point with COVID, Black Lives Matter, the riots, the election of 2020. There've been a number of these, and I think this is the latest in a string of inflection points that in my view, it is just highlighting the reality that conservative Christianity is not a particular brand of Christianity, but it is Christianity. Christianity is inherently right wing, and it is aligned with nature. It corresponds with the way God made the world. And so, if a Christian is just speaking of the scripture, speaking of the way God made the world, of natural order, of ordered loves, things like this, there's going to be a resonance because the alternative is being so vividly portrayed right before our eyes. And the alternative is leftism. And that, I know it's a vague word that you could put a lot of meaning into it, but generally speaking, just categorizing generally, leftism is the alternative. And so what we have then is this showdown clash of worldviews where you have one that's kind of rebelling against nature, they're rebelling against the created order, rebelling against ordered love. It's globalist and it is inherently poisonous and destructive. And then you have the other worldview, which is biblical Christianity, conservatism, that is very much aligned with and moving with the grain of the way God made the world. And so these inflection points create opportunities for people like us who, if we're outspoken about very ordinary, normal, boringly biblical things, it resonates with people who are kind of coming out of their slumber. They've been plugged into the matrix. They've been kind of catechized by the world. And then somebody like William Wolfe comes along and says something that just arrests their attention. They're like, hey, that's real. That's reality. I haven't heard anybody say that before. And so it pops off. It really resonates with people. And so the thesis, I know this is a long answer to a short question. The thesis is like, this is a great opportunity, great moment for Christianity to be explicitly right wing, which is to mean it's just biblical and not afraid to say it. And the people that are really responding to it are people that want to live in reality. And there is if you like the parable of the soils, there's different kinds of unbelief, different kinds of rejection of God. The fertile soil that we're seeing right now are people that are generally aligned with the way the world is made. They may not believe in Christ, but they see reality. They want to live in reality. They're not trying to actively oppose it. And so this is a moment. This is a cultural moment, an opportunity for clear, unashamed, right-wing gospel proclamation to reach people. And the irony there is that this does map generally onto politics. There's There's a political party that's running headlong against reality. You've got transgenderism, you've got cultural Marxism, and then so the preachers that are not only right wing in their theology and just their understanding of the world, but they're speaking about it and they're applying it in the public realm, which would include some degree of politics. Those gospel teachers and preachers are also finding great audiences and they're resonating. That's what Charlie Kirk's assassination highlighted. I mean, I was a fan of Charlie Kirk before he died, but when he died, what you saw is people coming out of the woodworks, and you saw just how incredibly huge was his platform and his influence, and it awakened the sleeping giant. To where now there's a lot of young people that like they want to hear the gospel. They're looking for solid, bold, courageous leadership. They want to hear truth. They want to be confronted in their error. They want to be challenged to be better people. Men especially, they want somebody to kind of grab them by the shirt collar, say, "Hey man, you can do this. You can be a better man." And those are the kinds of messages that are really resonating. And that's not what we've been trained to do from our, you know, academic elites and cultural leaders and thought leaders and so forth over the last 20 years or so. And so that's a change. This is a change that we're seeing happen.
Yeah, well, I think that's a really good recap. And as I think about Charlie's life and his work, and I was a big appreciator of what he was doing, obviously before he passed away as well. But what was so remarkable to me is that people think of Charlie, or people have thought of Charlie, primarily in many ways as a political activist. And he was doing political activism. He was building an incredible, powerful grassroots political machine that was dragging really the old school GOP kicking and screaming to the right. I've been to CPAC before, and I'm not trying to knock on CPAC, but CPAC was this big conservative coalition event that really TPUSA had sort of eclipsed at this point with their America Fest. And it was more active, it was more right wing, and it was also more pro-American. It really dragged us away from the Chamber of Commerce, free people, free markets, open borders, view of the world. America is just an economic zone. And these ideas have really taken hold in this second Trump administration too. But all that to say is, what's so remarkable is after Charlie's death, one of the main things that people are talking about is his faith, more so in many ways even than his political legacy. I mean, they're so intertwined, and you could pick maybe a famous Republican politician, even if even if Donald Trump, if they had been successful in the attempt on Donald Trump's life this last summer, Trump would have been spoken about in doing great things for America, but he probably would not have been spoken about as being a champion for, the Christian faith, right? Or pick anybody else. And so really we have this combination now in light of his assassination where we're talking about both his politics and his faith, because that's who Charlie was. And then these clips come up over and over and over again where Charlie is just like, he's an apologist, right? He's like doing the apologetic method, defending Christian truth and intertwining it with politics. So I just think that's remarkable, and it speaks highly of Charlie, that a man who was maybe more known as a political activist before his death, now after his death, people are saying, well, he wasn't just that. He was a Christian martyr. He was a Christian apologist. And I think that's true. And you've written about this a lot. And so let's get into two of the articles that you've put up for us here recently. The first one is called "The Right Wing is Right for the Harvest." So we're going to talk about the opportunity and then the challenge, which is that second piece, the cognitive dissonance of the Christian elites. And so when you wrote that piece, "The Right Wing is Right for the Harvest," there's not a lot of people who would have written something like that in general American evangelicalism. So walk us through why you wrote that and what was going through your mind when you're like, hey, I want to point this out.
Yeah, I don't remember what prompted it. A lot of times when I write something, there's something that triggers it. I'll get fired up about something and thinking about it, and then I just have to get it out there. Um, so I don't remember exactly what prompted it, but the basic idea is that there is in this moment, I am seeing people respond very positively to the gospel. And it's not just the gospel, but it is an appreciation for the Christian faith. So if you were to put this in like Bible language, you have like your believers, true believers, and then you have people that would be like God-fearers. You have like Cornelius was a God-fearer. There was the centurion that Jesus spoke to who had more faith than the Jews of his day. And so what we're seeing, I think, is this arisal of God-fearers. And so I would put guys like Jordan Peterson in this category, who is not a Christian. I don't believe, from what I've seen and heard, that he is like converted in his heart, but he is a respecter of Christianity, and there is something in the way that he thinks and writes that is congruent with Christianity, and I think he appreciates it. We've seen the same thing from Elon Musk. We've seen the same thing from guys like Joe Rogan, which I heard a recent report that he's going to church. There's the British guy, Russell Brand. Is that his name, Russell Brand?
Yeah.
Now he claims, he says he's a Christian convert. He's been baptized, but he wasn't. But he is a professed faith, but he wasn't before. Now, and even guys like so there was, which is the atheist guy? I know it was one of the four horsemen, but he was saying something like, I want to. Do you know what I'm thinking of, William? Like he'd said a couple years ago. I don't know if it was Dawkins or Hitchens. One of them died.
It was the one that didn't die. I think it's Dawkins. Christopher Hitchens died. Yeah, okay. It was Richard Dawkins. Yeah, he was essentially saying, I mean, he's watching Europe and England, he's watching his homeland, right? That's what's triggering this for so many people. Yeah. They're watching their homeland be run over by pagans, by Muslims, by third world migrants who have no respect for Christianity and no respect for the cultures and the traditions of these Anglo peoples, English, Scottish, Irish, Americans. And these atheists who spent decades arguing against Christianity as being sort of a non-plausible belief structure they're waking up and realizing, wait a minute, everything I know and love about my country is grounded in Christianity. He was talking about like Christmas hymns and Christmas songs and so that was Dawkins. Yeah. So you've mentioned Peterson, Rogan, Dawkins, others. These guys you're looking at them. Those are sort of big figures, but you're also looking at the young men too.
Yeah, ordinary guys, young guys. So think of this, William. I don't know, like, where are the high-profile leftists that are becoming Christians? They're out there. But what do you notice about those conversions? You can't remain a leftist and become a true biblical Christian. To become a biblical Christian, you have to forsake leftism. And so you have women like Rosaria Butterfield. I've gotten to know her a little bit. Wonderful, godly woman. And she was like a radical leftist, feminist, lesbian woman. She became a Christian, and she's only gotten more right-wing over the years, more faithful, more biblical, more outspoken. And so it's like Christianity is coded right-wing. And so so there are some people that aren't leftist, they're on the right, and they see the enemy. So it's kind of like there's a couple different ways you can do evangelism. The one way to do evangelism is the typical approach, which you start with God, send, Christ, response. So there's God, he's holy, man is sinful and fallen short. Christ is the remedy, and then we must respond to that by faith. That is one way, great way. Praise God for that. There's a new thing that I'm seeing now, which is there's evil out there, and it is awful, and I'm terrified by what I see. But I don't have a worldview that can account for that. I don't have a worldview that gives me the intellectual ability to call something evil, because I have no transcendent grounding for what I believe. And so they're looking for something. What has answers? And they're realizing, as the West is still haunted by Christianity, all the things I love about my society and my family and the good things that I can detect, all of these things are the fruit of Christianity. So Christianity gives me the tools that I need to say rape is evil, abortion is evil, racism is evil, cruelty is evil, violence is evil. And so I have to adopt a Christian worldview to call the evil thing evil that scares me. So now I'm kind of living in this Christian world. What do I look around in this world I'm in? What do I see? Well, I see a holy God. I see my sinfulness, and this. So it's kind of like backdoor evangelism. You're being kind of backed against a wall, and you're afraid of something. And it's like, I need something that can show me the way out. And so the gospel to that man is Jesus Christ came and he conquered sin, death, hell, Satan. And you can participate in his victory through faith, and then you can live victoriously by the power of the Spirit. That is also a valid, faithful presentation of the gospel, but it's hitting it from a different angle. It's approaching it from the direction of what is scaring you, what is and this is, I mean, like people in the third world, they've been ministering the gospel this way for decades. They're like, in these tribal places out in Trinidad, or some tribal area where there's a lot of witchcraft and voodoo and a lot of scary things. The gospel message there is Christ has victory. You can have the power of Jesus over these evil spirits that are oppressing you. That's kind of the flavor of evangelism that I see gaining traction these days. And you have guys like Joe Rogan. They're reality respecters. They're God-fearers. They're generally wanting to live lives congruent with the way the world is made. And Christianity is the last man standing. It is the worldview that is hospitable to and compatible with the way they want to live. And then once they see themselves living in this worldview edifice of Christianity, it's not that crazy to like say, hey, like you have all the building blocks there. And the building blocks and the cultural things are like pre-evangelistic. It's like, go all the way to Christ, go all the way to Jesus, explicit faith in Christ. And some of these guys, they seem to be warming up to. Sean Ryan is another guy, another conservative guy. So you take one last thing. You take all these big names that we're familiar with. Now, what's happening? And a lot of the young guys, they're watching these guys. They're listening to them. They're paying
That's the
attention to them.
connection.
Yeah, and they're like, "Hey, all my heroes are saying positive things about these guys or about Christianity. They respect Elon Musk, and he's tweeting Bible verses. What the heck?" And then the Charlie Kirk Memorial was like, "Okay, here it is, Technicolor. Let's put it on full display." And you saw a convergence of right-wing politics and politicians, but they're all talking about Jesus, or at least many of them are. And I'm not saying they're all godly, wonderful elder candidates, but we're seeing the respect for Christianity put on public display before the world's largest audience ever assembled for a gospel proclamation. That's what's happening with young men, and they crave it. They want it. It gives them something to fight for. It taps into their deepest needs and desires as men. I want family. I want something to fight for. I love my community and my people. I don't want to see it erased. I don't want to see it, taken over by foreign people that I don't know and that don't respect our culture. And that's really tapping into their deepest needs and desires.
Yeah, no, there's so much I could respond to there. And I had pulled your article up and I pulled it back down because you were just riffing, but I want to pull it up and look at a couple specific things you said. But we're really preloading the conversation on the cognitive dissonance parts, because over and over again, as you say these things, I just keep thinking, yeah, but I hope they get in the right church. Or I hope they don't. I hope these guys, they don't get excommunicated from their church for saying, I don't want my community overrun by foreigners. Like, it's like if you want to live in a reality respecting world, you think transgenderism is evil. You think that, homosexual couples shouldn't be adopting kids via, surrogacy arrangements for designer babies, all these things. And then you find your way into vanilla Big Eva style, winsome third way church, like they're going to beat that out of you or kick you out. Right. And so it's, there's a lot of those issues there. But let me go ahead and share your article again, because I think there's a couple really great points you make in it that I want to make sure we don't miss. All right. So can you see that, Michael?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, I want to, as the editorial, chooser of the picture, I want to point out that the ordered structure of the brains on the right and the disordered structure of the brains on the left was an intentional choice, because that's essentially what you're arguing for here. So you say, right-wing believers know what time it is and they're hungry for a message that gives them hope and purpose. Give it to them. That's what you just said. But then you make this really important point here, which you just sort of covered, but like tease it out a little bit, because this gets into that methodology and the cognitive dissonance we're going to talk about. You say, we don't live in a monoculture. We're going to offend somebody. It's only a matter of who and why. And then you talk about the different offenses that can be given to the right and to the left. And so essentially, Michael, you're arguing that the right-wing unbelievers who have some respect for God and the Bible and natural law, like they're actually open to being offended by their sin in a way that the left is not. Is that essentially what you're arguing?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. So right-wing Christianity, and I'm talking about true biblical right-wing Christianity, is humble. because we live in the world that God made. We receive it and live in it with thanksgiving. And so the Christian life begins with like, okay, God, this is your world. This is our Father's world. You made it. You're sovereign king over it. I live in your world and I live in it on your terms according to the rules and nature as you've designed it. That is a right-wing way to live. Now, the left is rebelling against that. God, I don't like the body you gave me. I don't like the way the world is ordered. I don't like living in cause and effect. I don't like the idea that if a man does not work, neither shall he eat. I don't like those things. I don't like that I'm not allowed to take things from other people. So I want to construct an alternate worldview and build a political ideology around it where I can tax other people's stuff and give it to my friends, take things from them, or I can force other people to comply with my gender ideology, or I can force my body under a surgeon's knife to correspond to whatever I want it to be. But it's all a fiction. It's all like they are rejecting reality. And so there is an arrogance to it. It is a pompous, haughty, God-hating, and that's what Romans 1 says. Thinking to be wise, they became fools because they exchanged the truth of God and put a lie and an idol in its place. That is what leftism does. And so you have your garden variety right winger. That's just the way he lives. And so you tell him, hey, you're a sinner. Don't talk to your wife that way. Hey, you can't live that way. And you just tell him, and he'll generally have the sense that, yeah, I can't live that way. I can't be an idiot. I have to live in the world the way it is. He may not be a Christian yet, but because he is a reality respecter, you can preach the gospel to him. And there's going to be at least a more receptive soil for the gospel seed to take root than in a leftist heart, which is more hardened in its opposition. And there's more objections to overcome. I'll pause there in case you have stuff to say there.
No, I mean, I think that's right. And I like this Romans 1, Romans 2 distinction you have here. When you talk about the left, you say things like they wear moral anarchy as a badge of pride. And you really nail sort of their elitist nonsense. You say they hold master's degrees and PhDs, yet they think that if you drug up a little boy with cross-sex hormones, you can turn him into a girl. Right. It's like they believe these insane things, and they're going down that Romans 1 spiral, full-throated advocates for the LGBTQ revolution, mainstreaming political violence. And essentially what you're saying is that you have to offend these people. And this is, the gospel is offensive. Natural order is offensive, right? We're running up against an entire political party right now, a movement in America that's the fruit of, 70 years of a cultural revolution, where it's not just that they're offended if you tell them God exists and you're a sinner and you need Jesus Christ. They wake up and they're offended by the way that God has made the world. And they
100%.
And they are trying to reconstruct the world and even themselves in their own image. And you're saying largely, you're painting in broad strokes here, though, that you say right-wing unbelief reminds me more of Romans 2. They aren't Christians, but they have enough light of truth to acknowledge God, hold the Bible in high regard, uphold the natural law and the civil order. And you make the point that these things are not the same. And so, that's, you're saying, like, you're arguing essentially, Michael, right now, that if you want to see people reached and saved, you're essentially arguing you see more gospel receptivity on the right than the left. Now, Michael, I have to ask you, is this you saying that you don't care about left-wingers becoming Christians? Because somebody accused you of that.
Yeah, no, that's silly. It of course I want left-wingers to become Christians, but they have to repent of the sin that is afflicting them, which in this case it is a worldview and an ideology that is hostile to God. And so it's the thing is that I like the way you put it. Basically, to people on the left, reality itself is offensive, and so what we hear to do, the typical tools that we're told to use in evangelism is you kind of have to, I remember this with Tim Keller. He would say you kind of enter into their worldview, you affirm some things of it, and you challenge some things of it. But the thing is like to enter into the worldview of a leftist, you're entering into a fantasy, something that there's very little there to affirm. And the things that you're affirming ends up being pandering to their conceit. And by flattering them, you are giving them ammunition to believe their own press. And that just doesn't work. You can't enter into the worldview of a leftist and say, here's a bunch of things I want to affirm about you, but let me give you this little tweak that is where I'm going to preach the gospel. That not only is that not true, but I believe in the truth of God, the truth of Scripture, and I believe God's power works through truth. His Holy Spirit works through the preaching of truth. And so the way that you want the power of God is activated in a gospel testimony is by telling them the truth. Now, that doesn't mean shout and scream and yell and, call people names. It just means that you're very direct and you get to the point. Like, this is error, this is wrong, and I'm going to tell you, you're going to meet the resistance from my words, and that is where the power of. So basically, there's no growth, there's no life change unless there's friction. And what we've been trained to do is to eliminate the friction. And the gospel presentation should feel like a nice pillow or a cushion or a hot tub. It's warm and it feels good. That's not what you see in the Bible. You see friction where so I think of Acts 17 which is often held up as the paradigmatic way to do gospel witness in a pluralistic type society. And Paul says, hey, there's idols, but idols everywhere. See, you're very religious. Let me proclaim to you this one that you don't know. But where does he end it? He says, God commands everyone everywhere to repent because he has fixed a day where he will judge the world. I mean, that has to be where our gospel testimony takes us. And so we're going to offend the left because we're speaking what is true and what is real. And so the idea that we can avoid not giving offense, it is a fantasy. We're going to offend somebody. And if we live in this, if we live under this pretense that we can't offend anybody, then we're never going to say anything at all. We're just going to be very vanilla and bland, and we're not going to have any teeth or power. So I just want to tell any pastor that's tuning in, and I'm like, offense is going to happen. So choose your target, choose who you're offending and why. Do so with God honoring, Christian love and charity. But it's like, pick your moments and don't pander to the left, because that is going to harm your ministry. It's going to harm your gospel witness. There's no power in it. Don't do it.
Right. And you're not arguing for like a new seeker sensitivity. That's another thing. I mean, this has been the slap back, the clap back from Gospel Coalition, JD Greer, Trevin Wax, all these guys, the big Eva guys, the mid Eva guys, is they're looking at people like you, people like me, other people who are recognizing what's happening in the world that we're living in. And they're saying, well, you guys are now just doing seeker sensitivity to the right wingers. But what you're saying is, no, I'm not. I'm living in the world as it is. Not only the world God has made, but the current cultural conditions that exist, right? There's no particular honor in blinding your eyes to the cultural conditions that do exist right now. And that's a sort of act of foolishness, ostrich burying their head in the sand. And instead what you're arguing is, no, put off this winsome to the left, coddle left, punch right, third way that you argued was non-political and non-offensive, but in reality, it was actually pretty political and pretty offensive just to the people on the right, because you've been trying to reach these leftists. Like, again, I've talked about this before, is like all the studies show America is becoming less religious. America is becoming more diverse. America is becoming more pluralistic. And so if you adopt that mindset, that paradigm, I have to reach the non-religious. The non-religious are on the left. So the non-Christians who come into my church that I could potentially reach with the gospel and save for Christ, I have to speak to them. Like, I have to enter into their leftist paradigm and reach them. And by doing that, I can't address like the conservatives. The conservatives are already on board. Those people aren't coming to church anyway, probably, right? Like the people coming back to church after Charlie Kirk's assassination are right-wing young men. And that's another thing too, is like, if you just ignore the world that's happening around you and just go on, like, say you don't even like try to, punch right, coddle left, but you just ignore the world as it is, these people are going to show up in church and say, do you live in the same country I live in? Have you seen the same news I've seen, Pastor? Or like, are you just in this hermetically sealed parish bubble.
Yeah.
And so that's really, so just respond to that quickly, Michael. It's like, you're not arguing for a new seeker sensitivity. Is that correct?
I am not arguing for a new seeker sensitivity. So I'll give you two principles that, and I'm speaking to, let's say, a pastor type of person with these. The first one is what every or most pastor knows is what you win them with is what you win them to. And so, or another way to say it, you keep them how you caught them. And so if your message is this pander to the left, coddle to the left, and punch to the right, you're going to attract a certain kind of person that wants that. And if that's what they're getting, then that's what they're going to expect. And then if you do that over a period of time, your church will grow accordingly. To then you'll have a number of people who in the church that if you ever deviate from that pattern, they're going to get offended and upset. And so that's like a church that is squishy at best, leftist at worst. And whenever you start preaching truth, they're going to revolt. The second thing is a little leaven leavens the lump. And that is true in a church body. And so if you're pandering to a particular kind of group of people, then you're going to get you're allowing their errors and mistakes to flourish and thrive, and that will spread. And so it's not like, well, let's just start pandering to the right and punching to the left. No, it's just like, preach the truth. When you preach the truth, the leftists are going to get offended and upset because to them, reality itself is offensive. And so preach truth, preach reality. And if they get offended, then that's on them. But what I think people don't understand is that people on the right, because they want to live in reality, they're at least going to be more receptive to a message that challenges them. That's what I found in my church. And so, like, as a pastor, I've been doing this for over 15 years. Whenever I preach a hard message, if I preach hard on pornography, or if I preach on laziness, or if I preach on, taming the tongue, it is the most conservative members that you would think are that's aimed at. They come to me and they thank me, like, man, like that. They're like, man, that was so convicting, so convicting. I mean, that is high praise from a conservative. Is how convicted they feel when they leave the church. They want that because they're sheep, they're hungry, and that conviction is food for their soul. And then you tell them that Jesus died and they have unity and union with Christ through faith that forgives them and they can walk in victory. Leftists don't want to be convicted. They want to be coddled and pandered to. And you're lying to them if you refuse to address their issue. And the problem that a lot of pastors are in, and I know this firsthand, the problem that a lot of pastors face is you have a church that has been you're keeping them how you caught them. So you've pandered to them to get them in the door. That leaven has leavened the lump. So you now have a left-coded church, even though you may not be left yourself, but you're in an environment that is hostile to a truth-speaking message. And so you're counting the cost, knowing if I speak out on the things the way Michael is saying here, the way William would have me speak, I'm going to lose half my people. I'm going to have my own elders come after me. And I would say, yes, you are. Yes,
you sound like
will.
You're speaking from experience, Michael.
I am speaking from experience. Yes.
Yeah.
This will happen. And the thing is that I'm like, okay, what did you sign up for? When you became a pastor, what did you sign up for? Did you sign up for a nice, cushy ministry where, you get a job in a 401k? And I'm like, if you have that, praise God, I'm not against those things. But ministry is spiritual war. And that means that you have to pick your battles. I'm like, okay, I want to fight this battle and I want to count the cost, and I want to take whatever consequences come from going into the battle. I've written about, there's a lot I could say about that, but that is the reality I think a lot of people are facing. They're seeing this Charlie Kirk revival happening, and they're like, there's no way I can capitalize on it, because if I start preaching this in my church to reach these young conservative guys, I've got people that are already here that'll be furious to hear that, because they want me to condemn guys like Charlie Kirk.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. And that's actually why I'm trying not to be too pessimistic these days. But, a month after Charlie's assassination, and just some other breaking news stories. I mean, we saw the story with the blaze and what happened to Daniel Keene at that church in Texas. And we don't need to go into it now, but that is not a rarity. Like I am confident, and I know that outspoken right-wing young men in evangelical conservative self-professing conservative, even the guys who say we've got the good theology, we've got the good ecclesiology, like we've got it covered right now. Those churches, like, they are not safe havens for men who want to come to Christ because of somebody like Charlie Kirk, because those churches would excommunicate Charlie Kirk if he showed up at them. So I'm a little pessimistic, but hopefully maybe this conversation wins a few more people. And I think what you said there is really important. And I wrestle with this too, because as much as I pay attention to hypocrisy on the left, I do often filter, like, are we being hypocritical on the right? It's like, we're saying don't punch left, coddle right. But if you do what you're talking about here, Michael, you will probably be punching left a little bit more, but it's not because we're adopting a ministry method of punch left, coddle right. It's because the way that politics has developed in America to this point is that when you preach gospel truth, it punches the left like square in the face, right? Yeah. It just does, because they don't want to hear it. And you have to, and what you said, I think, is so true there. Like, I bet that in the vast majority of conservative evangelical churches across America, that if you got up and you preached a hard-hitting sermon against pornography, that most of the men who would be most impacted by it would thank you for it.
Yes.
If you got up and you preached a hard-hitting sermon against feminism, you know where the women in the church would not respond the same way. Right. And that just I think a good, dichotomy that shows the divide here. But we've been going for 40 minutes here, so I really want to get into the cognitive dissonance. So you sort of highlighted there's an opportunity here. The right wing is ripe for the harvest. And so pay attention to it. Don't do some new seeker sensitivity. Just preach the gospel truth and stop pandering to the left. Like, if you stop pandering to the left, you will reach the right, and they're more receptive in many ways. But there's a problem here. The problem is that our seminaries and our pastoral networks and our leading evangelical thinkers don't see this. And that brings us to your second article. So let me go ahead and pull it up here, which is the Charlie Kirk and the cognitive dissonance of Christian elites. So what is the cognitive dissonance, Michael?
The cognitive dissonance is we've been trained in a certain, when I say we, I'm just speaking generally, this gospel-centered, our tribe. And so if I'm speaking to our tribe, I think what we've seen is a reformed evangelical Christianity that has been trained in a particular set of tools. Tim Keller, gospel-centered preaching, Brian Chappell, it's been dubbed winsome third wayism. But basically, it is this: let's not be offensive. Let's try to speak in such ways that will gain us an audience, a favorable audience, assuming a neutral and receptive, reasonable public square.
And you call this the inoffensive gospel ministry model?
Yes, yeah. So that, and now maybe the proponents of this would not say it quite so overtly or bluntly, but that really is the net effect, is that we're not putting a stumbling block in front of the gospel. And the stumbling block would be things like conservative politics, or certain dealing with certain sins in the Bible, homosexuality, abortion, sins that are more the favored precious sins of the left. So inoffensiveness is the coin of the realm. So the people that trained us to do that, they were saying, this is how you reach the culture. This is how you win the world for Christ. And they were explicitly against people that do the sort of things that Charlie Kirk did, which is I want to mix my politics and religion, and I'm going to do so explicitly in a right-wing way. And that was dismissed as, man, that's the moral majority, kind of warmed over. We tried this back in the Jerry Falwell days, and it was a disaster. And we saw Republican politics get in bed with the church, and it was just somebody said, like, the church is the Republican Party at prayer, was one of the ways that they made fun of it. And so we're told, don't do that. And I was trained in that. Maybe you and I'm sure you've heard this. but I know I was like a generation of pastors that was trained in this way. But what I found, so I planted a church in an inner city context in Cincinnati, so pretty liberal, very like 5 or 6 blocks from the University of Cincinnati, so very much a leftist kind of cultural environment. Um, and sorry, my phone's ringing there. So we're doing
If
this in
it's JD Vance, you can take it.
no, I can put that off. But we're told, like, so I was in this leftist cultural environment, and what I was finding is just that the more I would try to implement these tools that I was taught, I find, man, I don't feel like my preaching has any teeth or any power. Um, I'm I'm hitting my head against a brick wall because I've been told to not really thunder against, hard cultural sins. And that just made it all the more difficult to be effective in ministry. And so I got to the point where I just said, like, I can't do this anymore. I have to reject this and try a different approach. Let me get back to your question because I'm rambling a bit. The cognitive dissonance is for those guys who preach this method for 20 years. They're now sitting on the sidelines and watching the single largest and most pointed and direct gospel preaching event ever, possibly in human history, at the Charlie Kirk Memorial Service, is now doing the very thing that they said could never be done, should never be done. And we're now seeing if it's a revival, I don't know, but whatever it is, it's good. There's a renewed interest doing all the opposite of what we were told to do. And I just was kind of picturing some of these guys thinking, like, on the one hand, they're like, if they're really honest and humble, they'd be like, I got it wrong. I missed it and I was wrong. But most people don't want to do that. Most people want to try to justify it. It's like, well, that's not what I meant. And, they try to rewrite history, or they try to rebrand themselves and try to get out. They want to ride the new wave, the wind is blowing conservatives. They want to get out in front of that. So, I know this wasn't part of our discussion, but I did a little experiment yesterday. I quote tweeted you, and I said something like, and I started like, I was wrong about Donald Trump. 2016, I didn't like him, but 2020, 2024, I voted for him enthusiastically. I was wrong. I can admit it. That's how you grow. I wish more people would do the same. The reason why I did that was I wanted to just put out there, and I'm like, you know what? It's okay as Christians to say, I missed that one. I was wrong, but now I see things differently and I want to change. We call that repentance. It's like, not that missing something about Trump was necessarily a sin to repent of, but I was just like, I was wrong.
It depends on how you did it.
Well, that's true. That's true.
Right. Yeah.
But that post popped off. I mean, it's over 1,100 retweets last I saw. I mean, and I was just like, there's a hunger for that. Just say you were wrong. For a lot of these guys that are trying to pivot and rebrand, and I'm like, just say you were wrong. I'm like, hey, you know what? Charlie Kirk is right. He was right. I was wrong. I thought you needed to coddle to the left and punch to the right. I was wrong. I want to change, and I'm going to pivot my ministry strategy. Do that. I mean, like, we're Christians. We can do that. But I think the cognitive dissonance is more likely to be doubling, tripling, quadrupling down on the very methods that got him there, or rebranding and trying to pivot without anybody noticing.
Yeah, well, it has been fascinating to see, the contrast between Charlie Kirk and Tim Keller. That's been a subject of conversation for a lot of different podcasts. We talked about it. We've talked about it some on the episode I did with Steve Gentry, Nate, and Dusty. I talked about it with Ryan Heffelbein and Virgil Walker on Freedom Center, and had, quite a good bit of response from that. Other podcasters are talking about it. Allie Beth Stuckey, Michael Winger, other podcasters too. It's obvious that these people see these as like two sort of contrasting, in many ways, opposite ministry models. And you mentioned Keller and other people there too. And what's happening is that people are really doubling down on their defense of the third way. I mean, that's what J.D. Greear is doing. That's what the Keller acolytes are doing. It reminds me of the meme from The Simpsons with Principal Skinner when he's thinking like, am I the one who's wrong here? No, it's the kids who are out of touch, right? And it's sad, but I think you're right. They have to be sitting there. These guys have to be sitting there thinking, did I get this wrong? No, I didn't get it wrong. Let me double down. While at the same time, 100 million people heard the gospel because Charlie Kirk didn't just mix faith and politics. Let's be really clear about this. I've been looking for an opportunity to say this live on camera here somewhere. It's not that you mix faith and politics. It's that you can't separate them. That's what it is. So what we've been taught with this, I think this inoffensive gospel ministry model that you are dissecting here tried to tell us was that you could separate faith and politics. And that's an impossibility. Your faith has to always inform your politics. Your politics should be built on the foundation of your faith, and to try to separate them is foolish. And that's what these guys did. They tried to box off into these two sealed containers things that go together and that God intended for them to go together. I mean, what is the law of God if not, a righteous political ordering for our lives together? The 10 Commandments are political. They're law. Law is political. It's not the gospel, but it is politics. And so the conceit is not that you shouldn't mix faith and politics. The conceit is that you could ever separate them in the first place. But let's go into this next section here, because this is what really struck me, Michael, is you imagine what would have happened if Charlie Kirk had gone to seminary. So it's like Charlie Kirk, one of his big things was he never went to college, and he wrote a book called The College Scam. Now, I'm not saying somebody should write a book called The Seminary Scam, but I can't say I didn't think about it after your article. But so like if Charlie Kirk had gone to an evangelical seminary, what would have happened to him, Michael?
Yeah, I think that he would have been taught the same thing the rest of us were taught. He would have been taught to, you want to be academic, be careful. You don't want to stick your neck out too far. You want to position yourself to have a nice ministry career. And the thing is, like, I'm not against academics. I'm not against careful. I'm not even against nuance or even, dare I say, winsomeness properly defined and applied. These things have a place. It's when they become unquestioned dogma that are applied across the board without discretion. That's a problem. And what would have happened to a guy like Charlie Kirk is like he's clearly I hate saying that. He was this bold man that had a prophetic vision. He could see things. He could get right to the heart of the issue, and he wasn't afraid to say the thing that everybody knows is true, but you're like, that's true. I can't believe he said it. His courage and zeal would have been educated out of him, and because he's so brilliant as a thinker and a speaker, and I could imagine a guy like him. I've known guys like this in seminary. I'm sure you do too. Guys like that could have been a Charlie Kirk kind of guy, but they ended up, just climbing the ladder. And you get in the seminary world, and you're like, I like this. I mean, there was a time when I was like, maybe getting a PhD and going the professor, the scholarship route. I mean, there's some appeal to that, and I love the academics. I love. They're godly, bold, lion-hearted academics and scholars. I praise God for them. But there is a way that the academy works that it's just incompatible with the prophetic voice. And if you look in the Bible, the prophet type guys, they're outside the system. They're that you don't have like priests from the priestly class. You don't have the kings. They're these guys that they're not part of the priestly system. They're not one of the kings. They're these guys that are just out voice crying in the wilderness, and they're speaking into the system from the outside, calling out its corruption and hypocrisy. And that's what I see Charlie Kirk being. And I'm glad for that, because his prophetic voice was needed, and God has used it to awaken millions of people. But if he did go to seminary, I mean, obviously we can't know what might have happened, but I could see that happening. And you kind of, the incentives and the way that it's structured, it kind of pulls a guy like, oh, here's a star pupil. Let's draw him in. Let's get him on the fast track to some, dean of a department. I could see him being groomed for a career. You might be a seminary president someday. And then that route would have been, there's a way that could have gone that would have been awesome. But we know the reality. How often does it go awesome? Very rarely does it go awesome. Usually it's like, well, I have to be respectable. I have to, kind of mute my voice. I have to say things in a particular way that will sound academic, that'll get me published. Um, and the incentives would have just killed that zeal.
Yeah, you say that if Charlie Kirk had gone to a typical evangelical seminary, he likely would have lost his edge. He would have learned to be more careful, more measured. There's a good chance he would have had his prophetic voice educated right out of him. And then you do say, I'm not against measuredness and carefulness. I thank God for theologians and academics, but this is, I think, really the heart of your article here. You say, my point is that our theological institutions are far more adept at producing academics when the need of the hour is more prophets. You just sort of teased out that the way that that works is the profits are outside of the system, and maybe that just is how it works, man. Even as I'm talking to you here and I'm thinking about this, and I think about what I do with Center for Baptist Leadership, trying to reform the Southern Baptist Convention, while at the same time, of course, I want those guys to like me, some of them, at least, not all of them. But can you even be in the institutions? Can you be a part of it and still tell the truth? Because it really seems that the cost of admission to ascending the ranks of our theological institutions, the evangelical institutions, is the price of your voice. It's the
Yeah.
price of being willing, being able to tell the truth honestly. Like, I saw this clip recently, Nate Schloman shared it yesterday, of Charlie Kirk just off the cuff eviscerating Ed Stetzer.
I saw that. I saw that today.
Right. And good for him, because Ed deserves it. Right. Like, Ed has been a node for all kinds of liberalism brought into American evangelicalism and COVID nonsense over and over again. But if Charlie had been a professor at Southern, or if he had had a book deal with Crossway in the works, the next thing that he would get after saying something like that is a call saying, you need to apologize or we're canceling your book deal. You need to apologize or you're coming off faculty. Like, it seems really, Michael, that this, it seems like it's the cost of truth and your voice. So, like, what does that mean for us? Like, where do we go from here? Is it just impossible? Can there ever be a Charlie Kirk in the system? Or is that always going to be outside the system?
Yes, but the system will not be handed to them in most cases. So in the academy, you are, if you're a professor, if you're president, dean of students, whatever, the system was built before you. And if it's a good system, they've been there for a couple hundred years. And nobody is just going to hand that over to Jeremiah or Isaiah or Ezekiel. Those guys are a threat to the system, because the prophetic voice, what the prophet does is they speak truth that nobody wants to hear. So prophet, they are in God's presence. They see things that God lets them see, and they say the thing that nobody wants to hear. And so how does a guy like that get paid? He has to have a revenue stream that does not tempt him to compromise. And that's why the prophets always operate out of the system. What Charlie Kirk did is he built his own platform.
The prophets were also destitute and broke. It's not exactly a good path for providing for your family.
That's right. Yeah. So it's like they had other jobs. It's like it's not like there's you're collecting a paycheck as the prophet of Israel. It's like the word of the Lord came to you. That's your burden, and you spoke it. And so a guy like Charlie Kirk, he built his own platform. And so there is a way to attract a number of people, given our digital age, using the internet, and so Charlie Kirk was not in a church or he was not pastor of a church or working in a seminary. He was an activist. And then he had donors that there was enough of them that said, I want to support what you do, because I can't say what you said. I'm not as good at it. I'm not as smart as you, but I agree with you. And so they'll support it. And so I think what we have now is a lot of the prophetic types, they are dismissed as being the always hyper online guys. And there are those guys, of course, that you have. There's always idiots. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about good, godly men that they found a way through the internet to be able to get an income, get a living, doing their prophetic work. And I think there's a place for that, and the proportion of them will be relatively small. There's not like, it's not like you're going to have millions and millions of these kind of guys that are all trying to speak at the same time. There's going to be relatively few in number, but the problem is just that they're criticizing the very system upon which they would depend for a paycheck. And so guys like that are a threat. It's going to be hard for a guy like that to be SBC president, to be a seminary president. A lot of times in a church, they'll run him out of a church because he'll say the thing that nobody wants you to say. And it doesn't matter that it's true. Because, I mean, I've been reading through Jeremiah, and I'm struck by how often it's just like that prophet is lying to you. Like he's calling out the false prophets, and I'm like, there's lots of false prophets, and the false prophets tell you what you want to hear. They prophesy good news. They say peace, peace when there is no peace. They'll say the temple of the Lord, temple.
The
of the Lord
third way still works, guys. Stick with it.
Yes. and so there's a kind of prophet that is bold, but in ways that are good for their careers, and that's the challenge. So I think it can happen for a prophet to have that sort of influencer voice, but I think very likely he's going to have to find alternate ways to fund his work. And I'm assuming in that comment that he's doing good work. He's legit. He's a good guy, not just some idiot with an account, but he's a good man doing good work. So we have to find a way to monetize it to attract donors to it or something. But that I think that's the only way. That's how Kirk did it.
Well, I think that's one way. But in your article, you also say that, like, look, the need of the hour is more prophets. What is the purpose of conservative evangelical theological training if not to produce men who have prophetic fervor and courage? Whether they use that in the pulpit or elsewhere, is a question of where God has them. But you say the status quo is not going to cut it. You say this, one thing is clear going forward, the status quo is not going to cut it. The way forward for the church is more voices in the mold of Charlie Kirk, not less. And then you say this, unfortunately, the roster of men who not only could, but would train the next generation of Charlie Kirks is pretty thin. Most evangelical churches these days seem more likely to excommunicate the next Charlie Kirk rather than embrace him. So maybe, Michael, the way forward here, and this is what I think, and I'd love your feedback on this. It's not so much that we are looking or saying that we need the next president of Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary to act like Charlie Kirk, right? That's probably not actually, that's not prudent. That's not the role of like a seminary professor, right? Although they could certainly do things like Charlie, like they could go have conversations with people who disagree with them. They could defend biblical reality prophetically and courageously in ways that maybe many people don't. But it seems more that our institutions need to pivot to be more welcoming to whoever the next Charlie Kirk would or could be. Is that what the solution here is? That's what I think it is. It's like, I wouldn't you want that? Like, wouldn't you want to be an institution that produces a man who lived the life and had the impact of a Charlie Kirk, who boldly took the gospel into the political realm and told people uncomfortable truths that brought them back to Christ, who didn't adopt this inoffensive model and who didn't try to foolishly separate faith and politics. And I just wonder, can any of our institutions produce that? But maybe that's the change, is can our institutions pivot to where maybe they're not going to be run by a Charlie Kirk type, but they can produce the Charlie Kirk types?
Yes, I think that's totally possible. I think a big part of it is just don't get in their way. Like harness it, train it, refine it, but don't punish it. Because what happens so often is that these guys are punished and they're sidelined, and it's like if a guy has a certain personality, if he's bold, if he's direct, if he's aggressive, then that guy's going to have a hard time finding a place. And I'm like encourage those guys. So don't get in their way and don't suppress them. But just help to encourage and build up their zeal. There's a lot of guys that I'll meet in ministry that are young and they're aggressive. And I think a lot of these young guys that are interested in ministry is like stallions versus mules. The stallion, it's like, okay, he's wild, but he's strong. He's a majestic, beautiful animal, but he's wild. And that guy, it's like, okay, let's harness. Let's not put you in a cage, but let's find a way to harness that strength and set you free so you can run. There are other guys that are mules that are just like, you can't get them to do anything. They're not very motivated, and they're just more like kind of stay in their lane. And I think that those stallion types that do tend to threaten the system, those are the things that we need to find ways to set these guys loose, to train them, equip them, to encourage them, and help them to stand, to kind of refine some of their excesses, because a lot of these guys, I mean, there are excesses that need to be toned down, and told, like, okay, let me affirm what you're doing. Let me affirm the goodness of your gifts, and let me give you some godly counsel about how to best utilize the gifts for the good purpose. A lot of times what these guys are told is like, hey man, you got to tone it down. It's like you got to knock that off. And it just they kind of quench the spirit, throw a wet blanket on their gifts and their passion, and just convince them that there really is no place for their gifting in ministry at all.
Yeah. No, I think that's right, man. And you finished with this line, and let's kind of just tease this out as we end here. You say, this will be part of Charlie Kirk's ironic legacy. He did the opposite of everything Christian leaders are taught to do, and ended up building a ministry platform that produced the largest single gospel preaching event in human history, which I think is a defensible contention here. And so if professors or people in the system are listening to this, I mean, you kind of just gave some of so one piece of advice is don't get in these guys' way, harness them, train them, equip them, stop hauling them in to HR for conversations about tweets that are not sinful, but you just didn't like. Stop. That's from personal experience. Stop excommunicating men from your church who have the totally radical and indefensible belief that America is for Americans. I mean, who thinks that, right? So get out of their way. But also, I think something else you're arguing here, Michael, is that like our theological institutions need to also reconsider what we were talking about earlier, in terms of how are we training men to approach ministry? Like they need to forsake this ministry model, this inoffensive gospel ministry model that has been advocated for the last, 20 years here, and train men to rightly give offense. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Yes. Like, giving offense can be considered a tool. Right now, it's considered, like, if somebody's offended, it's like the emotional sabotage thing that Joe Rigney taught us about. If you give offense, that is regarded as, well, you must have done something wrong, William. Look at these people that are offended. And the fact that people are offended is seen as all the evidence needed to verify that you did something wrong. If I were training guys, I would say, hey guys, pick your moments. You have some guys that are blowhards and they just like being provocateurs. They just like being offensive. And I'm like, don't be stupid. Like, use your offensiveness and your willingness to offend. Use it strategically. Be smart with it. Pick your moment. Like seize your target and attack it and offend the crap out of it. And let God work through your focused attack on that thing. That is a good thing. And I think there are guys that they never mature out of this. If they're like this prophet type that likes to provoke, they've got that edge to them. They never mature into wisdom because nobody takes the time to invest in them. And so they're just kind of out there and they're saying things and they're just angry and they're venting. And I'm like, that guy, a lot of guys like that, they're very smart, but there's nobody that is really can invest in them and help to sharpen and refine that and tell them, like, here's how you can use that gift, that willingness to be bold and courageous and gutsy. Let's help you shape that for something that will really produce great fruit in your ministry. I mean, that's what I think is missing. Boldness is, I mean, if you read like the old guys, the Puritans or our heroes, Charles Spurgeon, or, going back a couple of 100 years, there was a value of this bold voice. We appreciated that. And now we've so adopted this Tim Keller model to where it's like this Manhattan elite presumed target audience kind of shapes all of our Christian speech. And anything that we might say that's bold and direct is kind of dismissed as being fundamentalist. And that's a wet blanket on the zeal of a lot of young guys that need to know their gift is valuable and their gift has a place in the body of Christ, and they can use it and should use it. And seminaries can train those gifts to do it well. The first step is just stop suppressing it, stop shaming guys and hauling them into the, or the student disciplinary process, that sort of thing. But they can be refined. I don't want. I'm talking too much, so I'll
No,
stop
this
at
is
that.
no. I think you just really touched on it. And this is let's like wrap up the conversation here, which is that just it's the difference of looking to appeal to and reach the cultured elites, or having eyes open to where God is moving, not trying to manufacture an inauthentic revival. But it is clear to me, at least, in the wake of Charlie's life and death and the outpouring of the reaction to his assassination, and these clips that we have seen over and over again. There are so many clips that God is moving among men, among young men, and God is moving on the right. I mean, I'm very not, I'm not charismatic. So even when I use that language, it kind of makes me like, oh, what do I mean by God is moving? It's just like, but like what you're saying is like, there's a receptivity to it. Like, what Charlie said, get married, have kids, leave a legacy, live for Christ. I mean, listening to Erica yesterday at the event was just, incredibly inspiring for me. She said, Charlie had no fear. He lived without fear. And I just think of, even still, I try to be bold. I try to be courageous, and how much fear I live in and with, and she said he didn't care about losing friends. He didn't care about telling the truth, even when it was unpopular, because his confidence was grounded in Christ. And we need men like that. And those men are not in Manhattan, right? Those men are not in San Francisco. Those men are in the areas where you've lived your entire life, along the banks of the Ohio River, right? They're in the flyover states, and then they're in the areas of this country that have been neglected. They're the men who don't qualify for the racial diversity quota scholarships at Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary. And are we going to reach these men who in many ways are the backbone of this country and tell them, you're valued, you're not evil, you need the Lord, but let's get to work? I mean, I think that's the contrast here that you're laying out.
Yeah. Yeah, I love what you said there. It just made me think of like some of the things that these sort of courageous, bold pastors or potential pastors would need to know are things like you said. It's like, how are you going to deal with losing friends? How are you going to deal with the dark, lonely nights when you feel like you're saying something true and right, and people are coming after you, and you're doubting yourself. You're wondering, how you're going to survive in ministry for much longer. It's like those are the kind of things that needs to be trained. I mean, Charlie Kirk was a natural. He's 1 in a million, but there are a lot of guys that are potential Charlie Kirks that would need to know, how do you deal with the death threats? I mean, this man was murdered. He was murdered for saying true things. And that same spirit that murdered Charlie Kirk is, to some degree, after anybody who would speak of the same type of things and with the same kind of boldness and clarity. How do you deal with that? Where are young men that want to follow his example going to learn how to do that? We've got to find a place for them. Hopefully it's at least in their local churches where they can find support and encouragement there. But we need to have some higher ed options for them also.
Yeah. Well said, Michael. Well, thanks for joining. It's been a fascinating conversation. Folks, make sure to read Michael's pieces. They're very helpful. The Right Wing is Ripe for the Harvest, and Charlie Kirk and the Cognitive Dissonance of the Christian Elites. There's really so much more we could continue to tease out from there, but Michael's been very generous with his time. Michael, remind all of our listeners where they can read all your stuff.
D is in the first, just the letter. It's my first initial, dmichaelclary.com. And D. Michael Clary is my Twitter handle. So dmichaelclary.com is where I write articles for Substack. And then D. Michael Clary is my Twitter handle. And that's kind of the R&D department where I'll test ideas and develop them further for articles later.
You're pretty prolific on Facebook too, so people can find you there. And thank you for writing for us at the Center for Baptist Leadership. If you're listening to this, as I try to do on all of our podcasts, and you're a Southern Baptist, make sure you start planning to come to Orlando. Everybody says, I want to do something. All right, come to our annual meeting and be prepared to help us get some new leadership in the Southern Baptist Convention that's more in line with the courage that we've been talking about today. Also, if you're in Oklahoma, please join us tomorrow for a Center for Baptist Leadership and American Reformer and TPUSA Faith co-hosted pastor roundtable in Norman, Oklahoma. You can find that information on, we sent out an email with it. You can find it online at our Twitter as well, and we'll post it again after this. But if you're a pastor in that area, whatever denomination you're in, please join us. And then there's a TPUSA event at the University of Oklahoma tomorrow night as well. Russell Brand will be there, Michael.
Really?
So yeah. So there's we're doing a pastors roundtable 4 to 5, and then there's a big TPUSA event with Russell Brand and the governor of Oklahoma, Kevin Stitt. So if you're listening to this, you're in Oklahoma, please come visit us tomorrow, 4 o'clock. It's at Horizon Point Baptist Church in Norman, Oklahoma. Michael, thank you so much for joining us today, man. Really encouraged by your life, your ministry, and the insights that you have.
Thank you, William. It's a pleasure being with you.
All right, I'm going to play our closer here and finish this out.
The Center for Baptist Leadership podcast is powered by American Reformer, hosted by William Wolfe, with audio production by Jared Cummings. Our music is a custom remix of Soldiers of Christ in Truth Arrayed, the official hymn of Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. To help CBL reform and revitalize Christian institutions, please consider making a generous donation today at centerforbaptistleadership.org.